In this video, I'm going to look at 3 different ways to try and solve the same algebraic problem. What we're going to do is simplify this expression. We're going to do that by using the distributive property of multiplication. We're going to multiply that -8 through these terms. We're going to see what we come up with. I'm going to look at 3 different ways to do this. And the first way is kind of the brute force way that everybody is taught, but because there are so many negative signs in this, it's very common to mishandle the negative sign. So I'm going to show 2 other ways to deal with this that might help you better deal with a negative sign. So if we're going to distribute it, it's -8 times 4y minus -8 times v minus -8 times 5. Now I'll just do a little note up here. Some of you might prefer to write this plus -8 times -v. Either way would be correct, and you could write this as plus -8 minus 5. I prefer the way that I've written it in the black letters here, just because that tends to make more sense because it's minus v, and so forth. So that's the way I have written it in the past. That's the way I prefer to do it, and I think that is more an accurate way to represent it. So -8 times 4y is -32y minus -8 times v is -8v. That's an 8. Minus -8 times 5 is -40. Now, because we need to continue to simplify this, it's -32y plus 8v plus 40. That is a v, and that is an 8. So this is the mathematically correct way that probably most of you were taught. But what I have discovered is when you multiply a negative number through multiple terms, you create great opportunity to lose negative signs in these various areas. I'm going to break this out a slightly different way, and I'm going to write it as -1 times 8, and then multiply that by 4y minus v minus 5. So the question is, why do I break out the -1 and the 8? And that is, for the next step, I'm going to leave -1 outside, and then inside I'm going to do 8 times 4y minus 8 times v minus 8 times 5. Now, the advantage of this way is I get to multiply 8 through and don't have to worry about this negative sign out here. So again, next step, -1. 8 times 4 is 32y minus 8v, that's a v, not a u, minus 8 times 5 is 40. Okay, now I get to multiply the negative through. -1 times 32y is -32y. -1 times -8v is plus 8v, and -1 times -40 is plus 40. Now, some of you may want to actually write down -1 times 32y minus -1 times 8v minus -1 times 40. My parentheses are off just a little bit here. And then negative times a negative. You might want to write it out the way I have it in red here, but if you get used to multiplying -1 like this, you don't need to write that step down. It can be more confusing to write more negative signs. So now let's take a look at another way to do this. I'm going to break this one down a little bit differently. I'm going to do 8 times negative 1 times 4y minus v minus 5. Now, the reason that I have the negative 1 after the 8 this time is I'm going to do 8, and then because it's just negative 1 times 4y minus v minus 5, all I have to do, 4y times negative 1 is minus 4y. Negative 1 times minus v is plus v. Negative 1 times negative 5 is plus 5. Now, this is the way I actually prefer, is just to multiply through by a negative. And let me show you over here. I'm going to use a weird green color. I can just take negative 8, 4y minus v minus 5, and I can write 8 times negative 4y plus v plus 5. And the reason I can do that, when I multiply a negative 1 through everything inside of parentheses, I just change the sign of everything. So the fast, easy way is to go right to here. And if you'll notice, these two are the same. If you understand this shortcut, it will save you a lot of time. If you do not understand this shortcut, do not use it, because it will cause you to make simple math errors and you'll lose negative signs. Now that you have the negative multiplied through, I'm going to write this in the middle here. You can just take your 8 times negative 4y plus 8 times v plus 8 times 5. 8 times negative 4, negative 32y plus 8v plus, looks like a 3, so I'll go back and correct that. 8 times 5 is 40. Okay, so 3 different ways to approach the same problem. The first one, I multiplied negative 8 through everything and had ample opportunity to lose negative signs. There are negative signs all over the place. But this is the kind of mathematically pure way of doing it. This is the way you're taught to just multiply things through. Second way I did it, I separated the negative 8 out as 8 and negative 1. I multiplied through by 8, and then I multiplied through by negative 1. The advantage of this method is you're not multiplying by a negative number other than 1, which tends to be the area where folks make the most mistakes. If you multiply by negative 3, negative 5, negative 8, something like that, you're more prone to make an error than if you multiply through by negative 1. So you multiply through by 8, and then you multiply through by negative 1. And the last method, the way that I would traditionally do this, and I've done a lot of algebra, so I tend to take a lot of algebra shortcuts that I'm very confident in. And the reason I take them is there are a lot of steps to algebra, so if you can find a shortcut that you can do reliably without breaking any rules, that's a great way to go. So multiply through by the negative 1, and I just do that in one step by changing the sign inside the parentheses. And then once I change the sign inside the parentheses, I just distribute the 8 and don't have to worry about a bunch of negative signs because 8 is positive. So that is the way I would go through and solve that.